All right, this part of the show is about CCAP fraud. Let's go ahead, the B1, Dawson. This was a story from KSTP News. They broke this Tuesday night. That's why we didn't talk about it on Tuesday's show. But we know CCAP very well. Go ahead and hit that play button because I think they're going to put ads up front. So just keep it off the vault. Oh, no, never mind. I guess you have the ad blocker, don't you?
Yep.
All right, so CCAP was something Action for Liberty fought against, actually tried to get rid of this program. Child Care something program? What's the A stand for? Child Care Assistance Program. CCAP is essentially a redistribution of wealth. Every Republican should be against this thing. Why on earth is the government in the business of child care? That is such a ridiculous claim. So it should have been an obvious yes vote from Republicans. Nope. They fought against us. They would not get on board with ending CCAP, even though $100 million that we knew of had actually ended up going to fraudulent daycare centers that didn't even have children in them and got flown over to fund terrorism overseas. Big story. I think that was 2019, maybe it was 2018. Huge story. So we called on Republican leadership, Paul Gazelka, weakling, and then I think that by that time the Republicans were in the minority in the House. It just fell in deaf ears. These guys didn't want to do anything about it until Mort took office, and Mort actually had a bill that ended the CCAP program. Mm-hmm. Now, as you guys know, we were ready to fight this in 2020. There's some kind of, I don't know, big nationwide global issue that came up in 2020 that really required us to build and grow and fight against. So obviously COVID, totalitarianism, stole the show, and we had to fight that. So CCAP wasn't our main issue to fight against, but we shouldn't even have to build resources and fight against it. Republicans should have just taken the leadership on that, right? Why are we funding other people's child care? Why don't if you want to solve this issue, you think the government's got a role, how about just give them tax credits? As long as they do child care on their own, give them a tax credit. It's their money anyhow. So anyhow, this is now a new story of massive fraud. I'm just gonna give you a warning here. When you see Jay Crowell's going to these sites, your blood is gonna boil. I mean, it's so stupid how much these people rip us off. Go ahead, play it. Go full screen too.
Crack down on fraud in state government programs after scandals questioned their oversight.
We got complaints about the Child Care Assistance Program and took a closer look at some of the daycare centers receiving millions of your taxpayer dollars. And we found reports of violations state investigators called a threat to the safety of children at centers that continued to receive those federal dollars.
Jay Cole spent months looking into these issues, and he joins us now with what he's found in a story you're seeing first on 5. Jay.
Yeah, Lindsay, CCAP is a $34 million state program that receives federal funding. It benefits more than 12,000 low-income families each month across the entire state. Learning of growing concerns about the program from sources at the Capitol, I started looking into some of the daycares receiving the most money. Despite many serious safety violations over multiple years, they continue to receive funding. And now some state lawmakers want an investigation into what they call a lack of oversight of the CCAP program. I started by visiting Quality Learning Center Daycare.
So it is that 14B.
Which sits right in the heart of downtown Minneapolis. Between 2019 and 2023, the Minnesota Department of Human Services found 95 violations at this location. They range from failure to keep hazardous items away from children to no records for 16 children, which include things like immunizations, emergency contacts, and medical needs. So state investigators placed Quality Learning Center on a conditional license in 2022. I went to the daycare's location several times, and only
that looked like
once
an upstanding
did
place.
I see people there.
Oh, that's your daycare.
But I did not see any children.
Oh, shocker.
No.
After school? Okay, gotcha. All right, thank you.
DHS declined an interview, but in a statement acknowledged Quality Learning Center was put on a conditional license because of its poor safety record. But it still received nearly $8 million in taxpayers' money since 2019. its conditional status removed in 2024. I also
Look at
went to
this.
yet another facility, the Minnesota Child Care Center in this South Minneapolis building. I found it at the end of this small hallway with a
You
steel
gotta be
door,
kidding
no
me.
windows, and no visible
You
security
have
cameras.
got to be kidding me.
State records show between 2021 and 2023.
What a joke.
the
And they put a
daycare
sign
had
up like that's an
36
actual place.
violations, some of them serious. They failed to request initial background checks on 6 staff in 2023 and failed to request repeat background checks on 8 staff in 2024. Ultimately, the state would accept corrective documentation on these violations.
Wasn't anybody here last time either.
I
It's a
visited
mockery.
several times,
It's a
and each
mockery that they
time,
even
no
put that
apparent
sign up as if
sign
this is
of
an
any
actual child
workers.
care facility.
And each time, no apparent sign
Look at
of
that
any
door,
children.
too.
Anybody there?
Since
It's a
2018,
joke.
Minnesota Child Care Center, however, received $11.5
Oh,
million
$11.5 million,
in CCAP
though.
money. I asked DHS why daycare centers could still receive millions of dollars with questionable safety records over multiple years. In a statement, DHS said under state law, they can only stop payment, quote, when a provider intentionally gives false information or submits false attendance records. A provider is operating after a suspension or revocation of its license. There's a credible allegation of fraud and/or a provider refuses access to attendance records.
What does that say to you?
It says that the oversight is incredibly lacking.
I shared our findings with House Speaker designate Lisa Damon.
Are we keeping
Designate.
kids in Minnesota safe? And what you're showing me here brings that very much into question. You know, Jay, you have pages here that are publicly available with repeated failure to keep hazardous items away from children, failure to maintain adequate staff to child ratios, background checks, failing to keep personnel files. These are repeated violations.
As I was looking into the daycare center violations, I also found a connection between CCAP and the Feeding Our Future scam,
Oh,
which built
shocker.
$250 million from the
Shocker
state.
of the year right there.
In 2023, a man named Abdikadir Kadaya was charged with stealing $1 million in taxpayer money in the Feeding Our Future case. He's waiting to be sentenced after pleading guilty to wire fraud. But we also learned Kadaya also operated Intisar Child Care Center in Minneapolis. The facility received $1.8 million in taxpayer funds between 2017 and 21. But the license was revoked at Kadaya's daycare was shut down.
All
He
right,
has
that's
not
good
been
enough.
named-
I mean, thanks to KSTP and investigative journalism to get into that. I mean, my God, if only somebody or some group was calling for eliminating the CCAP program that today is continuously being used to take your taxpayer money and funnel it to scam artists by the millions, tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars.
Is this kind of thing a good idea if they can be 100% sure that there's no like?
No, I'm.
overstating it?
Well, it's like there's this old trope. It's like government's not full of angels, right? Like this idea that government's so great, it's not full of angels, right? Of course, if we were all angels, we wouldn't need government in the first place. It's the dilemma here. You're never going to get good governance, right? It's actually, in many reasons, why I'm so supportive of Donald Trump with, trying to get rid of federal workers, because you have to. They're just clog things up, and it's such an obvious reason why. So there's no incentive by a government employee to do great work for a customer. So just think of like a DMV. That's the greatest example. DMV's known to be so terrible. Post office, another great example. They're not incentivized because they don't really technically have customers. People are forced to use their service. Actually, in the case of the Postal Service, there's at least some bit of competition on some of their services, right? So there's just not an incentive there. But when you're in the private sector, when you're a business, you have all the incentive in the world, because if you suck, your competition's going to get your business. So there's just no way to really solve this thing, and that's why government needs to be limited, I try to entertain as many arguments for privatizing things, but I still think the military probably should be a government operation. So there's some rules for actual government, but most of the roles out there should be private sector. And in this case, Dawson, it's so simple. Because there's definitely a child care problem. No one's denying that, right? And that part of that is because most people are two-income households, and so they don't have someone that can watch children before school age, right? And there's lots of reasons for that. One of those is you can't really afford to have a single income household these days because of inflation. But there's the way they solve it is a government program, which is just going to drive up costs anyhow because you're going to have a bureaucracy managing it, and then you're going to get scam artists taking money from you. The other way to manage it is keep the government out of it and incentivize people with their own money. Give them an ability to shield it from taxes. You know, like my position always is I don't want people to have to pay any taxes. I'd rather they spend that money on their family. And in this case, if you think child care is a real legitimate thing that people should lose tax liability on, then just let them keep all their money and don't get involved in the process.
Yeah,
okay?
and we also got a $5 rumber ant. Right, he says state must have way too much money if they can do that. Right. And I think he's saying wasting all that money. And that's a great point. I mean, if Minnesota actually wanted to get down to the numbers, I'm sure that Minnesota's government could properly function if you cut it down to its most basic elements. If you cut the budget by 2/3, you could still probably have it function as a state government needs to.
At this point, I've been acknowledged that I should make an appeal for you guys to attend your conventions if you're a delegate to either party and should run to become a state central delegate. Mm-hmm. Look at the conspiracy there. So this message has been brought to you by, what was it, tennis player? What did we call him on election night? I think it was tennis player.
Can't remember.
Yeah, it was something like that. Or tennis fan. I'm sure Tushi's also watching this message. Make sure you go to your convention and become a state central delegate. Mm-hmm. Oh, my God. All right, I'm too much fun. All right. You got an article up on actionforliberty.com. What's in this?
Yeah, we can pull that up. The B2, Dawson. We pretty much have gone over most of what we've talked about already, but go ahead and scroll down to the Eric Mortensen part. Go ahead and scroll down just a little bit more. That's what Damuth is saying. But yeah, this is something Eric Mortensen put up in February 25th, 2019. So obviously he's been on top of this issue for years, where he was calling out Brad Tabke for spending this money. And go ahead and scroll down just a little bit further to see that Action for Liberty has always been on top of this issue too, because we were calling out Enabler, Jim Abler, who was also, fully on board with the fraudulent child care spending. So, while these Republicans are talking tough now, we'll have to see if they actually want to take action, because when Eric Mortensen put forward that bill to eliminate the program, he wasn't having any Republican co-sponsors on that bill. So where have the Republicans been on this issue when it's been an issue for years? Mm-hmm. Why are they just talking about it now? Why is it until KSTP puts something out that they finally decide to act on it? They have the control. They have the majority. It's time for them to do something with it.
Now, speaking of KSTP, Dawson, pull up the B3. This is actually Tom Hauser reporting from 2019. As this was falling on deaf ears with the Senate Republicans, we flew a plane saying, hey, Walls, Gazelka, stop funding fraud, which they knew what we were talking about at that point. Mm-hmm. They were funding child care fraud by continuing to seek. I mean, look, geez, the power of prophecy here. We could only see that if they continue funding CCAP, this would happen. Mm-hmm. Gee, weren't we right on that one? I mean, and by the way, it's been happening for 4 or 5 years. What's 2019? 5 years ago? Holy crap. Oh, almost 6 years. Jeez, has it really almost been 6 years? Mm-hmm. Holy crap. Time flies.